Right now, Europe is able to sustain its support for Ukraine because the United States is engaged and focused. But if American attention and resources pivot entirely to the Middle East, Europe is suddenly standing alone. And the uncomfortable reality is that Europe on its own probably cannot maintain that level of support indefinitely. Russia gets a window, and in geopolitics, a window is all you need. But the consequences do not stop at Ukraine. A full American invasion of Iran triggers a chain reaction that reaches every corner of the global system. Energy markets go into shock. The Strait of Hormuz, through which a significant portion of the world's oil supply passes, becomes a contested zone. Trade routes that have operated with relative stability for decades suddenly become uncertain. And when energy and trade become unstable, every government on the planet is forced to make new calculations about its own security and its own survival. This leads to something much larger than any single conflict. It accelerates the breakdown of the globalized order that the world has been operating under for the past several decades. That system, where trade is open, supply chains are global, and security is largely underwritten by American power, only functions when that power is stable, focused, and credible. The moment it becomes visibly overstretched, the foundation starts to crack. Countries that have relied on that stability begin to realize they cannot take it for granted anymore. And when that realization sets in, behavior changes fast. You start to see three major shifts happening simultaneously. The first is a reversal of the economic logic that has governed global trade. Countries that built their prosperity on cheap energy and seamless global supply chains suddenly find themselves exposed. So they begin rebuilding domestic capacity. Not because it is efficient or profitable in the short term, but because they can no longer afford to be dependent on systems they cannot control. This is already starting to happen. It will accelerate dramatically if the Middle East ignites further. The second shift is the fragmentation of global trade into localized blocks. Instead of one interconnected world market, you get several competing spheres of influence. Countries trade within networks built on trust, proximity, and shared strategic interest rather than pure economic efficiency. The world becomes more divided, more insular, and in many ways more volatile because the interdependencies that once made conflict expensive start to disappear. The third and most dangerous shift is remilitarization. When the global system weakens and the guarantor of that system is visibly struggling, every country has to start thinking about its own defense. Defense budgets increase. Armies expand. Nations that had grown comfortable with the idea that someone else will provide security start preparing to provide it themselves. And once that process begins at a global scale, the risk of miscalculation, of accidents escalating into conflicts that nobody actually wanted, rises sharply. From Putin's perspective, every single one of these shifts is a benefit because what they collectively represent is the dismantling of the system that has constrained Russian power and ambition for the past 30 years. A fragmented world with competing power centers and weakened international institutions is a world where Russia can operate with far more freedom. It can pursue its regional objectives without facing unified Western opposition. It can use its energy resources as genuine leverage rather than just economic tools. And it can position itself as a pole in a multipolar world rather than a challenger to a unipolar one. This is why patience is his strategy. He does not need to escalate.